Welcome back to another bonus episode of Best Hour of Their Day. I got a ton of amazing feedback from you guys last week when we gave you the prologue, the intro chapter to my book, Best Hour of Their Day, and followed up the chapter with a discussion, taking a deeper dive into my early years getting involved in my wrestling career and pre-CrossFit when I was just teaching group fitness and personal training for what seemed like 35 hours a day. Well, today is going to be the first chapter of the book, Best Hour of Their Day, and I'm super excited to present it to you. If you guys are loving this, please let me know. I hope you are. If you're enjoying it enough that you want to go purchase the audiobook, you can do that on Audible. And of course, I have the link in the bio here. So if you have any feedback, you have comments, you have questions, I'd love to answer them. I wrote this book as a passion piece, as a passion project. It was something I really cared about. One day I just started writing, and 30 chapters later and a whole lot of editing, I was done. So I really hope you enjoyed it. And I also want to give a shout out to the dude that's interviewing me, James McDermott. You probably recognize that we have a great rapport. That's because James was one of my head coaches at Albany CrossFit. He came to me as an intern, which we talk about a lot in these chapters, and he worked his way up to a coach and then ultimately my head coach. And he's one of the most fantastic human beings I know, as well as just one phenomenal coach. If you want to find out more about James, if you just think his voice is sexy, you can check out his own podcast. It's The Barbell Strikes Back. He's kind of a Star Wars nerd, spoiler alert. And you can also check out some of the books. He wrote a book with John North about Olympic weightlifting, and he's got a couple other really top secret books in the works that I'm not allowed to talk about. But trust me, if you like fitness, if you love CrossFit, if you just enjoy listening to people talk about their journeys through the health and wellness industry, you're going to want to check him out. You can find him on Amazon. You can find him on Instagram, all those places, James McDermott. So once again, here's chapter 1 of my book, Best Hour of Their Day.
All right, Jay, we're talking about chapter 2. We fail at the margins of our experience. I remember when I first heard that quote, that's a famous Glassman quote. It was actually an on-ramp way back in the day during my initial internship in the summer of 2011, and Brett was teaching. And after he said that, my mind was blown. I was like, that was the greatest thing I've ever heard. And I had no idea that it was a Glassman quote or anything like that. What made you choose that famous quote as the title for this chapter?
Well, like you, the first time I heard it, which I don't remember when, I was really drawn to it. So I remember hearing it. I remember being drawn to it. I don't remember the scenario, but I remember very quickly becoming my favorite quote that I would use in all aspects of life. And funny you mentioned Brett. Brett shows up in a later chapter, which we'll talk about. How is Brett doing?
He's doing good. He's big in the masters weightlifting scene now. He does the meets, and he's trying to qualify for nationals and worlds and all that.
It's fun to watch people that have been around. I mean, Brett. So I met Brett, and we'll talk a little more about it. But on the message boards of the old CrossFit, I don't think you were even around when the message boards came out. And it's like a forum back in the day before Facebook and social media. And Brett was in Clifton Park, which wasn't too far away, and very quickly became a member. And then he was my first 5:45 a.m. coach, and a great coach. But yeah, I see him on Instagram hitting all these heavy lifts. He moves very well.
Yeah. So there's a little teaser for a future chapter. More to come on Brett.
Yeah, there's some great stories that we'll get into.
So at the very beginning of this chapter, you mentioned another person from the past in Albany CrossFit history, Sasha. And he was your mentor, business mentor. And he asked you, what would you prefer, comfort or discomfort? And before we dive into comfort zones and things like that, let's talk a little bit more about Sasha. How did you meet Sasha? What's the origins of that story there?
The Sasha origin story. So before CrossFit, I was like the trainer at the core club. There was a handful of other trainers that would come and go. And there was this older woman, Kathy. I don't know if she's still there. Her son opened CrossFit Shatter.
Oh,
down the
okay. Yeah,
road.
I'm not sure if she is.
So, it was really just the two of us, and new people would join the gym, and we would, depending on what they've asked for, if they needed a trainer, Shai would then bring them over to us, or we would have met them already. So I remember Sasha joins the gym and says to Shai, the owner, "Hey, I need someone who's going to kick my ass. I need to get in shape." And Shai was like, "I got your guy." This was 2006, so I just found CrossFit, or not quite yet. And I started training Sasha in the upstairs area of the core club, and doing really basic stuff, but basic lifts, a leg press, a squat, standard stuff. This big dude from Bosnia, and former rugby player, made himself here in the United States, started a family, great guy, still talk to him regularly. And so we started this relationship as a trainer, and then I found CrossFit, started implementing it into Sasha's training, and then somewhere along the way, especially as CrossFit grew and I was able to save a little bit of money, Sasha was a financial planner, so we formed that relationship as well, where he would guide me on what I should be doing with not just my own personal finances, but for the gym. And then he really helped me to develop as a human being at some point. As we brought him in for coaches meetings and staff development. He would do a monthly meeting for just the full-time staff, me, you, Kevin, Caleb, Dean. I think Alex was involved for a little while. But that was really the beginning of it. And again, nearly 15 years later, Sasha and I talk almost daily via text.
That's awesome that you guys still, maintain contact after all these years and still good friends. Is he still, would you say, a mentor of yours? Is he still helping you?
Absolutely. I would, and now it's cool, as I think it works both ways. He looks to me for health and fitness advice. I still help him with his nutrition, and I still look to him, especially for financial advice, but also just for, advice when it comes to just trying to be the best version of you. So yeah, I certainly still look to Sasha for that.
That's great to hear. Those long-term relationships that you can form just from meeting someone at the gym. Now,
It's funny. Yeah.
he asked you that question, would you rather comfort or discomfort? And then he later phrased it as, would you rather comfort or growth? Because we often maybe don't realize that in order to grow, you have to get a little uncomfortable. Now, what, if you remember, are some specific challenges that he gave you that made you uncomfortable, that either in business or life or your training that you tried to implement after his mentorship?
Well, yeah, I mean, going back to the question, that was kind of like the opening remark of his discussion that he was about to have. Hey, everybody, what do you prefer, comfort or discomfort? And assuming you're just a normal person and you're not trying to, hedge your bets for the answer, everyone will come up with the answer of comfort. It's obvious. That's what we seek. And then again, when he rephrases it as comfort or growth, depending on the person, there's no right or wrong answer, but most of us chase growth in some aspects of life. And in order to do that, you have to leave your comfort zone. But something else he did is, so if you're listening to this and you're not driving, you're sitting there or walking, if you interlock your fingers, like you were doing prayer hands, and then just kind of let your fingers interlock with one another, go ahead and do that while you're listening to me talk. And you've probably done it in the way that you're comfortable. Where now if I said, hey, unlock your fingers and switch, so the other hand is on the opposite side of those fingers, and if it's, hopefully this is making sense to you, that's kind of his first test. That's like, hey, that's the difference. That's
Yeah,
comfort
I'm doing
versus
it right now.
discomfort.
It's awful.
It's weird, right? It is
Yeah.
awful. Like, so that was kind of the first thing. And then, the big challenges, especially back then, were just mostly how I handled the staff and how I handled significant others. Sasha just really opened my eyes to a lot of those things, and just how to not just be smart financially and not just chase discomfort, but also be just a better person.
Now, to kind of build off of comfort and growth, on page 40 in the text, you gave a bunch of examples on things that might leave someone out of their comfort zone, such as your job is comfortable, but you want to open a box, or you want to participate in a competition, but it's scary. And I thought it might be fun if we did a little, what would Jason Ackerman do if if placed in some of these situations? So we'll kind of run through the examples, and you can give your answer. And some of them we may have already touched on because, of course, you've opened the box. But there's other things on here that we don't think I don't think is ever discussed in the text. So let's
Okay,
just
let's
start
do
off.
it.
Let's start off with the easy one. Your job is comfortable, but you want to open a box.
Yeah, I mean, that was really the scenario that I was in. I was, comfortable as a people ask me about switching careers, and I never really had to switch careers, luckily, because I was already a trainer. So I was already at a gym. It wasn't like I was a teacher or a chef or, some businessman that I was like, I'm quitting. I was able to slowly phase out, my clients and my other classes, but obviously I went for the box. And I think that's something I would still do to this day. I've left, many comfortable positions, even recently moving to Boulder from Florida, super comfortable in Florida, had a nice position as a coach at the local box, training on the CrossFit staff, but really willing to go all in again and relocate to Boulder, with Roz and start a new journey with two companies out here. So it's something that I'm always willing to do, and I think most people are not willing to. As soon as and that was simply a matter of comfort. I was just comfortable in Florida. That's what I tell people out here. They're like, "What's different?" I was like, "Well, after 4:30 p.m., the only place you would find me in Florida is on my couch." Like that was it. I was done for the day. I was chilling out, reading, maybe watching a movie, getting some work done. But nowadays in Boulder, I won't get home till 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night because there's always something going on. So it's just a matter of I was willing to leave that comfort zone.
What are those two companies that drew you out to Denver or Boulder?
So I work with Thunderbro, Dave Lipson, and Roz works with Feroz Fitness and Camille LeBlanc Bazinet. And yeah, we're out here just growing the two companies, and it's going. And again, this is a great topic to talk about because I was really hesitant to do it and really nervous about it. And I knew Roz wanted to do it. And, again, it was really just a matter of, okay, I'm comfortable versus growth. That's what it truly came down to. I could have stayed in Florida and been comfortable probably the rest of my life, in Naples, not doing anything crazy, not making new relationships. And it wasn't even that big of a risk to move out here, right? I rented my house that I owned, rented a place out here, so it was kind of a wash. And ever since moving out here, it's been invigorating, exciting, energizing. Like I'm so glad I did it, but it was only because I was willing to leave that comfort zone.
And you've been doing this now for years, jumping into different projects and getting outside that comfort zone. You started Albany CrossFit, you sold Albany CrossFit, other gyms, Naples. Now, does it get easier every time you do it?
I think so. I think it does get a little easier. It's a good question. I think it gets easier in the sense that you've done it and you can do it again. Like Sasha's a great example of someone who I'll talk to about it. And he's like, I think before moving to Boulder, he said something like, I'm never worried about you because you always wind up, figuring out a way. And I think that's what's really important. And that goes for a lot of people. I think, that doesn't mean we moved out here. I mean, things have already changed since being out here, but hey, we could have moved out here. The relationship with Dave and Camille could have floundered. We could have really not liked them, but we still would have figured out what to do. And for a lot of people, I think it becomes, well, this is it. I have to make this decision. And if it doesn't work, I'm going to either revert right back to my comfort zone or I'm a failure. But that's not necessarily the case. Even, look at my second two boxes, Clifton Park, we'll talk about later with my partner. But I mean, you could really categorize that as a failure if you wanted to, for me.
Maybe
And
on
then
a relationship level.
certainly, and then CrossFit Soulshine, I wouldn't say a failure, but I mean, I left it. So just because you started something doesn't mean you need to commit to it forever. And just because you're doing something and it fails doesn't mean that's necessarily a bad thing.
Yeah, you're never really stuck with anything unless you
Yeah, I
make
mean,
some
I think,
really bad decisions.
and it's funny because actually the older I've gotten, the more likely I am to do something like this. Where back in my younger days, I mean, when I opened, from the time I graduated college till leaving the Albany area, really almost 20 years, I was really set there. Where now I think as you get older, you realize, hey, I can move around. And that's with whether you have a family, whether you have, a significant other now, whether you have a family in, we left my family in Florida, but long term, it was a great decision for us.
That's great to hear. Now, example number 2 of getting outside your comfort zone. What would Jason Ackerman do? You want to participate in a competition, but it's scary. Competition can be scary.
Man, that's a hard one too. I mean, I would like to say compete, but out of all things in CrossFit, one of the things I've done the least is compete. I think I've been a part of maybe 5 competitions where I've actually been on the floor competing, and they're always fun. And, I can relate it to jiu-jitsu. I love training jiu-jitsu. I don't necessarily go and compete often. There's people that compete every weekend, but I think you have to challenge yourself. And that's where you learn a little bit about yourself in either of those scenarios or any sport. But, CrossFit specifically, you always can get a little bit more out of yourself in competition. And a quick tangent, so every weekend at the level 1s, we do a workout that typically includes thrusters and burpees. I don't want to give it away, but it's a fast burner of a workout. And I always look for one participant every single weekend. And I've told many people this. I look for the one participant who I think I can get more out of. And it typically looks like they go unbroken on round 1, push pretty hard. And then around the middle of round 2, they're going to break the thrusters. They're going to break the movement. And I get in front of them and I'm like, you need to go unbroken. And then they push the second round, then third round, I really get in their face. And then not screaming like the way I like to coach, like, you can do this and come on, and push them to go unbroken. And then they typically do, and they collapse on the ground. And then afterwards, 99% of the time they come up to me like, I didn't know I can do that. And that's what the competition will do for you. Well, that's not a competition. I feel like just knowing you can do that changes the way you train going forward.
Yeah, I feel like the level 1 has the atmosphere of a competition, being around so many people, so many different faces and the coaches. That was my only goal, was to go unbroken on the thrusters when I retested level 1 back in July. I'm happy to say I did it. Wasn't happy doing it, but
well, and that's what I like. Even coaching a regular class as a coach, that's kind of always my goal, is to show people that they can do just a little bit more than they thought they could. So, bringing it back to your question, do the competition, learn a little bit about yourself, and hopefully you bring that back to your everyday training.
Yeah, you'll be a different athlete after, for sure. Question number 3, you want to ask out your crush, but you fear rejection. So a little bit of relationship advice mid audiobook here.
I think if either of us should give relationship advice, James, it should be you. But lately I can give advice, but back in the day, maybe not so much. But you've been in a long-term relationship.
Well, all right, let's do this 2-tier then. What would a young, spry Jason Ackerman do? And then what would the sage, older Jason Ackerman do when asking out the crush?
A young, spry Jason Ackerman would just flirt very heavily until they were comfortable and confident that this person was going to say yes. Right? So,
Okay.
And then the older me got to the point where it's just like, F it. I'm going to ask this person out. Who cares? So it was the same mentality, that I have in other things, but there's always that nervousness with a girl. So, it'd be like, I want to get to know and make sure I'm 100% confident that when she hears this question, she's going to say yes. Where, as I got older, it was more like, I remember going on dates, whether it was when I was in Florida or, brief periods of time being single in Albany, where it was just like, you ever watch Curb Your Enthusiasm and Larry David?
Yeah, last night or the latest episode.
Exactly, similar to that, similar to, what James is talking about is the second episode of season 10, if you want to get really specific. And he asked, the side sitting episode where, he asks out that admin girl. And, that's kind of where I was before dating, obviously dating Roz and marrying her, where it was just like, hey, you're single, I'm single, you want to try this? And then I remember, being on dates and being like, this is going pretty well, right? And because it was just, I found that women just enjoyed the honesty. And then it got to the point where And I'll tell people nowadays, that's the advice I'll give. Just if you want to, you go on a date, text the girl right after and be like, that was great. Don't play this game of like, wait 3 days and then you text. I'm like, girls don't want that. You don't want that. And if a girl wants that, she's not the kind of girl you want to date long term anyway. When Roz and I finally started dating and talking, it was like just boom, we were 100% honest and upfront about everything.
I imagine some of this plays into also kind of it's kind of funny, being a young coach or trainer early in their career versus being an older coach, where you're asking like does that feel okay? Are you having a good workout? Just being overly needy about things versus being like, no, just give me 10 more push-ups.
That's a great point, because at level 2s, I always tell people, like, I don't want to hear those fluff questions. How's that feel? Is that comfortable? I'm like, they don't know.
Yeah.
Like, they don't know if they're comfortable. You've told them to move their feet because you think they need to be a little wider to squat better. Who cares if they're comfortable? Like, no, this is highly uncomfortable because I typically squat here, but that doesn't matter. And it's the same with dating. Like, just be confident, go out there. I'm not saying tell them what to do, but, you don't, like you said, you don't want to ask those questions where you come off as needy, because every time you do that, inherently your athletes in this scenario are like, maybe he doesn't know what he's talking about. Why does he keep asking me?
Yeah, they start to have that doubt in the back of their head.
Exactly. So I always tell people, if they say things like, how's that feel? Is that comfortable? Even this one, hey, shake it out for a minute. I'm like, what is that? Shake it out for a minute. If you're a coach and you realize you're crushing your athletes doing reps with PVC, don't tell them to shake it out. Just give them a moment where you teach them for 30 seconds. The next point that you're going to look at, we're snatching. All right, in these next few reps, I really want you to think about where your feet land. You're going from your jumping position to your landing position. So on these next few reps, I really want you to look down at your feet every time. Now you've accidentally given them a 10-second rest, but you're still in charge, versus shake it out. So if you're listening to this and you say shake it out, or, give yourself a minute, stop that.
Yeah, it's funny. It's like it's a tool you can use, and athletes don't really know that you're giving them rest by giving the next piece of the instruction.
Exactly.
It's like, no, I'm allowing you to rest right now. All right. Well, last question here about comfort zones. You want to wake up early, but you hit the snooze button. I think a lot of people, I'm guilty of this. This is a tough one.
Well, yeah. And speaking of, realize it's 2 hours earlier for me as we're recording this. So I had to get up early and, get a little bit done before we hopped on here. But I can, with 100% confidence, say probably since college, I've never hit the snooze button. It's like my biggest pet peeve in life. One of the few fights Roz and I have, she doesn't hit the snooze, but she'll set the alarm, it'll go off and then stay in bed. I'm like, that alarm went off. You need to get the hell out of bed. Because either I need to get up or I'm staying in bed. But if you're not going to get up, why'd you set the alarm? So that's a fight that we don't have that often anymore, because we both give it up pretty early. But no snooze. Here's what I've learned about that. You could deal with the 30 seconds to 3 to 4 minutes of pain in your eyes, and then you're fine. And what you should be doing is going, really, that's just saying, hey, get to bed earlier tonight. So be healthier, get to bed early. But if you're someone listening and you hit the snooze button, I got some problems with you. I hate the snooze button. And I'm not just quoting Jocko. What's Jocko say? The snooze button kills dreams.
Yeah.
Whatever. Like, I'll still sleep in once in a while, but it's just like, if I set my alarm, it's because I have to get up at this time. I had a friend in high school and we would have like sleepovers, and his name was Jordan. And if we had to get up, he'd be like, well, let's set the alarm for 7:30 and snooze 3 times. I'm like, no, how about we just set it for 8 and get up when the alarm goes off? Like, I remember being even just a young kid always thinking that way. So no snooze for me, James.
Awesome. And no snooze for any listeners anymore as well.
I hope so. Maybe that's a small impact we can have.
We'll change the world that way. We'll get many dreams accomplished that way. Now, during this chapter, you also went on to discuss in more detail starting Albany CrossFit from the Court Club. After renting the court from Shy, which we discussed in the last audio sample, what was the turnaround time to make one of those courts into a CrossFit space?
It was fast. I think so. Trying to think the timeline. I found CrossFit, and then throughout most of 2007, I was implementing it with just clients. And then I decided, okay, I'm going to do this probably in the summer. That's when I started reaching out to Nicole Carroll, and I think I went to my level 1 in October of 2007. But I'm pretty confident my first check, and I think this because eventually like my financial years ran around this, was September 1st of 2007 was the day I started in the court. My first rent check written, the business officially starting. But I was teaching basically CrossFit as like a plyometrics boot camp class leading up to that. And it went really quick. It was like, all right, I'm going to do this. This is our last class we're going to have out here. And then we're going into, so if you want to be a part of it, you have to join my gym now, Albany CrossFit, rather than just coming in as a member of the core club. And it was, a week, because really it was just, for those of you that haven't been on a racquetball court, it's 20 by 40 high ceilings, and it's just empty space. And it was really just like, we threw equipment into this room and we're like, now this is Albany CrossFit. And then over time started to get more equipment, put mats on the floor, built our own pull-up bars, pre-Rogue. But it was a matter of a month, I would say.
And that's, that's something that's difficult for you to undertake, to make that change, but it's also was probably uncomfortable and difficult for the members and the athletes, because everyone's a little bit resistant to change. So even though they're doing the same thing with you in the boot camp class and whatnot, now moving down the hall into this space that now has the equipment, it's called Albany CrossFit. Were there any concerns that were voiced, and how did you deal with athletes or your clients that were a little on the edge about making that full leap?
Yeah, I don't think there was a ton of concerns. I know not 100% of the people that I was either training or in those classes came, but there weren't a lot of concerns. But like you're saying, it was very different. I mean, the court that we had was, if you've ever been to the court club, it was all the way down the hallway. It was the last one, no windows, dark room. So we went from being out in the middle of the gym to our own little small dungeon, if you will. There was no paint on the walls. The only thing that we eventually had was basically a sheet that we painted the Albany CrossFit logo on, which I think was some sort of like triangle with 3 people working out that I found on like MySpace back in the day. So it was really just, either you're coming with me and you're behind this, or you didn't come at all. But most of those people just came, and we just kept doing, and they were excited because we went from offering this class once or twice a week. I believe when I first opened Albany CrossFit, we had like 5 days a week. Like we were closed on like a Wednesday because I still had other obligations teaching and coaching at other gyms, until I was able to get rid of those and then, open up every day.
Now, when you opened up Albany CrossFit, did you still do anything with the core club, or was that a clean break? I'm Albany CrossFit now. I'm 5 days a week. These are my hours that I'm choosing to work, or were you still taking shifts?
No, I think I still had, I would say for probably the first 2 to 3 months, I still had a handful of classes because, at the time I was teaching spin and yoga and this plyo class. So I think I dumped the plyo class because I was like, hey, if you want to do this, you have to come with me. And then still offered spin and yoga for a few months. And then once the gym took off, I wasn't able, I remember just saying, I can't do this. Plus I was just really into training CrossFit now. And I didn't want to, when you teach spin, you're riding a bike, or when you're teaching yoga, I might've been doing yoga. And I realized, like I give advice to everyone, hey, if I'm spending time here, I should be working on the gym. Or, if I'm teaching a spin class at 9:15, why am I not offering a CrossFit class at that time? So it was really quick that I went from any role at the core club to just fully invested into Albany CrossFit.
You had to go all in at one point.
Funny enough, like technically I didn't go all in on day one, but it wasn't for lack. It wasn't like I was thinking I'm hedging my bets or I need to make money. It was just not knowing that I would eventually need to have class. I had one class a day at the gym at Albany CrossFit. So when I realized, there was no model for this at the time. So when
Yeah,
I
and
then realized,
things take time.
yeah, okay, now I need a second, third class, and I'm also having to do all these other little things. Very quickly I did go all in. I could have kept some other hours teaching or training people and supplemented my income, but I thought to myself, I'd rather, really invest 100% of myself in the box.
Now, right in the beginning, you're doing everything, you're doing the programming, and you have this limited experience. You're right at the margins of it. Were there movements that you were uncomfortable teaching or programming in the early days where you're like, all right, I know nothing about bring muscle up or snatches. I'm just going to avoid that. Was there anything you were uncomfortable with?
I don't remember being uncomfortable teaching the movements. And it's funny because I'm now thinking back on it, I knew nothing about these moves. I mean, I didn't know how to teach a muscle up or a snatch like I do now, but I don't remember feeling uncomfortable with it. So maybe it was a little false confidence. But I remember just almost more so being limited by the equipment. We literally had one space for muscle ups. So I didn't program it very often because there was one set of rings and only one set that were high enough that you can do muscle ups on. So again, or the snatch, I don't remember ever feeling like, hey, I shouldn't be teaching this. But I also now think back and wonder why I was teaching it, because I really didn't know it very well. It was probably more like, hey, take this and get it over your head. Like that,
So,
jump.
so you were limited by resources, and equipment, and then there wasn't so much out there at the time. But there are a lot of gyms and coaches these days that do avoid things because they're not comfortable teaching them. Do you have any advice for those people?
Yeah, I mean, I've talked about it on our podcast, Best Hour of Their Day, but you just need to become a better coach. You need to dive into those. You need to practice. If you can't coach handstand walking, for example, you need to figure out why and you need to learn more about it. And that's probably seek out people that are better than you, practice yourself, grab one person. And just because you can or can't do it either doesn't mean you shouldn't teach it. I had to teach plenty of movements to either people that were better at them than me or movements that I couldn't do at all. So you need to get over that feeling that you shouldn't be coaching it.
I think that's where maybe quite a few coaches struggle with, hey, Matt Frazier's dropping into my gym and he's taking class and we're doing muscle ups. What could I say to him? Like how do I coach this better athlete? What do you do when you're coaching someone who's way fitter than you are, which may be the vast majority of the populace in CrossFit, but like what do you do with those people?
Yeah, I mean, that goes back to what I was saying earlier about the level ones. A lot of the times the people I'm deciding to coach are fitter than me. I mean, they could be 20 years younger than me, but you have to draw back on your experiences, and just because they're moving 95 doesn't mean you couldn't get the same stimulus with 65. So you still understand that feeling and you have to draw on that. And then also, just for me, it's a little easier knowing how much experience I typically have over these people. And one of the people I remember, one of the first people I really ever remember feeling that way about at Albany CrossFit was Kevin Seaman. So Kevin was probably very quickly one of our best athletes at the gym. And he just got really strong. He trained a lot. I don't remember if I used his name specifically in the book later on, but there's a chapter that involves, that's really about him. Um, but he was a better athlete than I was, but and what I always appreciated about him was, even though he knew he was fitter, he would still come to me for advice. And it's no different. I don't watch a whole lot of professional sports, but the Super Bowl is coming before, as we're recording this, and I'm pretty sure whoever's coaching those two teams is not the best athlete on the team, but they're all going to listen to them.
Yeah, and it's like when you approach that person, you're also going back to care. You're showing them that you care and that you're interested and invested in their improvement, and that'll keep them coming back too. Whereas if you always ignore them and you're like, "Oh, that's good, good," you move on. They're like, "All
And
right, well, no one here cares about me."
yeah, and now what I would tell someone if they're like, okay, I'm really nervous to do that, don't be afraid to go up to them and say, hey, I know you're stronger at me than this, but you know, I made big improvements in my own training doing this, or I saw a video doing that. And most of the time they're going to be open to them. And if they're one of the few people that are like, I don't want to hear it, they're not probably good members for your community anyway.
Yeah, I remember back when you still owned Albany CrossFit, and we would have our coaches meetings. We always like to demo the movement first, even if it's just the wall ball. Like, hey, let's all get on the same page. Here's what we're looking for in the wall ball. And when you're going to have those types of athletes in the room, one thing that you told us to do was to give another piece of advice on how we can be even better at wall balls. Like, here's how you're going to shave 20 seconds off your carrying time. Here's how you're going to be a little more energy efficient to cycle through your rounds. Like, you've got to give athletes that are looking for that little nugget, and then they'll want your advice, and they'll see that you have something to offer other than make sure you squat below parallel and hit the target. That's for everybody, and that's for your regular athletes, your new people. But those higher level athletes, they want something a little more than that.
Yeah, and I think, and that goes to you as the coach. Like, you need to know that stuff. I know when I would take classes at North Naples CrossFit, the box that I coached at in Florida, the coaches there, they would always give a nugget that I was able to cling to and use. And it could be on the most simple movements. It could be on the wall ball. I know, listening to Matt or Dom coach there and, telling us how to move our arms when the ball is coming down, or how to try to catch it in the bottom to save time. Even a more simple movement, a box jump over, which is pretty straightforward. Hey, jump on this thing and jump off. How you land your feet, how you turn, all of those little things can help your athletes. And if you want to become a good coach, you need to be able to coach, the Kevins in your box, but also the Donnas.
Yeah.
And that just comes from experience. And like I said, like we were talking about, for me, that's what I rely on. My 20 years of, more than that at this point, coaching experience. And maybe you can attest to this as well, James. Like, once you get that little bit of that older coach look in your face, you get a different set of respect, right?
Yeah, you get some grays in your beard.
Yes.
You have a little limp as you're walking around the room, from
Yeah.
wads that you've battled through.
Like one of the
Don't care.
blurbs on the book is from Coach Bergner. No one ever goes up to Coach Bergner and thinks he doesn't know anything. They immediately listen to everything he has to say because he's been there and he's done it and he knows what he's talking about.
Exactly. He's expanded his margins.
Big time.
Well, that's everything I've got for you on chapter 2 here. Do you have any other thoughts or comments on comfort zone or getting outside, the margins of your experience?
No, I really like the questions you asked about this, because I think it's pertinent to not only the box, but to outside the box. And I think for anyone listening to this, it could be something as starting with, hey, don't hit the snooze button tomorrow. Like, hopefully we're giving out, when James and I originally started talking about this book, James you're probably one of the first persons that I would talk to and ask for advice. And there was a period of time where we talked about maybe having a challenge at the end of every chapter, depending on what the chapter was. So maybe today we can give a little bit of a challenge, and that's, leave your comfort zone in some area, whether it's, I don't need you to move across the country like I did, but it could be not hitting your snooze button. It could be, if you're coaching later today, going up to an athlete that's better than you and giving them some coaching feedback. Or maybe it's, hey, ask that girl out that's your Starbucks barista, and maybe, how many marriages would you say have come from Albany CrossFit?
Oh my God. 10? Like, so
Oh,
a
wait,
lot of them.
more than I was going to say as many as, okay, maybe marriages is, you're probably right about 10.
Relationships. Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
thinking relationships too. Like babies. So
Yeah,
many
but
babies.
like serious, strong relationships, probably in the 20s.
Yeah.
I mean, you got Stacy and Jean got married. I mean, who else met at Albany CrossFit? I'm thinking Alyssa and what was her boyfriend's name?
Chris.
Chris.
You already said Alex and Meech.
Oh no, I didn't say them, and
Yep.
they just had a baby. But even other boxes.
Caleb and his now wife, right?
Yeah, well, Lexi.
Yep.
Chris Anderson and Catherine, even though they're at different boxes. So, I mean, these are just off the top of our heads, right? I know there's more. Hey, Jess Lasky and Ben, who we're going to talk about in an upcoming chapter. And I'm
Yeah.
really excited to tell the story about that because I didn't go into full detail there. But I mean, hey, maybe Best Hour of Their Day, the book, is going to continue this tradition of introducing people.
Yeah. There's just going to be just families built off of best hours of your day.
But so whether you hit the snooze button or whether you coach someone you're intimidated by, or whether you go ask that guy or girl out, I challenge you today to leave your comfort zone, uncross your fingers, cross them the other way, and push out those margins.
Awesome. And let us know how it goes.
Thanks for listening to Best Hour of Their Day. If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me explain. First of all, it's free. How cool is that? There's a creation tool that allows you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer, so it becomes super simple. Some of these episodes with Fern or Todd or myself chatting with one another, we've done right within the app itself. Anchor will make it easy to distribute your podcast to all platforms, Spotify, Apple, and many more. And you can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make an awesome podcast in one place. All you have to do is download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started today. Come on, who doesn't have Spotify at this point? And if you were unaware, Spotify now is offering podcasts. That's right. On Spotify, you can listen to all your favorite artists, but also podcasts in one place for free. Spotify has a huge catalog of podcasts on every topic, including the one you're listening to right now, Best Hour of Their Day. On Spotify, you can follow your favorite podcasts so you never miss an episode. Premium users can even download episodes to listen to offline wherever you are, something I always do before I hop on a plane. And you can even easily share what you're listening to with your friends on Instagram and other social media platforms. Here's the deal. If you haven't done so already, be sure to download the Spotify app, search for Best Hour of Their Day on Spotify, or browse some other podcasts if you want. You can find them in your library tab. And also make sure to follow me so you never miss an episode of Best Hour of Their Day. Thanks again for listening to that special episode of Best Hour of Their Day. If you enjoyed, go ahead and download the book. You can check out the audiobook, you can check out the paperback, or even the ebook. We place the link right in the show description. So once again, thanks for listening. Have a great rest of your day.